Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining Childcare Aware of Minnesota for today's Tell Talk on the topic of telling the story of early child development with Diane Benjamin, Communications Director at Childcare Aware of Minnesota. Tell Talks, or Topics for Early Learning Leaders, are monthly webinars for early childhood program leaders to facilitate solutions-focused discussions for your questions about the early childhood field in Minnesota. These one-hour webinars do not meet the standards for a formal professional development training event, and participants will not receive a certificate of completion. Tell Talks are designed as a community building opportunity for leaders to engage and share ideas surrounding a specific content area. The Tell Talks team consists of Nikki Lepowski, Quality Improvement Coordinator, and myself, Christy Berg, Workforce Advising Coordinator. We work with Corey Woosley and Katie Hoffman at Childcare Aware to coordinate Tell Talks. Some of our previous topics have included Child Care Assistance Program orientation and Behavior is Communication, a panel discussion on supporting children and their teachers. On July 15th and August 19th, Tell Talks will be moving to Zoom for our next topic, Heart-Centered Leadership. The Tell Talk email blast coming in July will include more information about the topic, as well as the Zoom link. Please visit the career advancement page of our website to view previously recorded Tell Talks. After today's presentation, you will receive an email from me with the PowerPoint slides along with any resources shared. Childcare Aware of Minnesota is a resource and referral network for early childhood education in the state. We assist families in finding a quality childcare program. We support the professional growth of early childhood educators with professional development opportunities, eager to learn online training, grants, parent aware, scholarships, and trainer and RBPD support. We keep the community informed on the importance of quality childcare. Childcare Information Services is a department within CCA that specializes in statewide information sharing and assisting families who are looking for childcare. CCIS sends a welcome packet to new programs, and every 3 years they survey programs about their business policies and tuition rates. The rates are confidential and can influence CCAP reimbursement rates. CCIS receives calls from program leaders across Minnesota with general business questions and can route you to the appropriate person to contact. Childcare Aware partners with Center for Inclusive Childcare, which provides free relationship-based professional development, including support, modeling, and resources to childcare programs throughout Minnesota. A coach will spend time with your program providing support focused on the successful inclusion of children with challenging behaviors or special needs, implementing health and safety best practices, and/or supporting the unique needs of infants and toddlers in your care. Achieve, Minnesota Center for Professional Development, supports individual, trainer, and RBPD membership applicants and approves courses and training events. The Achieve MNCPD website has several resources to share, including a job board, policy info, membership help, info on how to track down your high school diploma, and a virtual career guide. The Tell Talks team partners with several organizations to offer coordinated resources surrounding early care and education needs. As always, participants of Tell Talks are encouraged to use the Ask a Question function in GoToWebinar throughout the presentation today. We encourage you to please share your questions and thoughts on today's topic with us. We will read these questions and comments aloud during the broadcast. If you would like to be unmuted to share your question, please click on the Raise a Hand button. And now I'm excited to turn it over to our presenter, Diane Benjamin. Thank you for being with us today.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I also am not going to be able to see the questions in chat as we go, so I'll ask Nikki to keep an eye on that. And I'm also going to ask her to tell me when you can see my screen. It's really hard for me to tell that from my point of view.
Diane, we can see it right now with the notes. There you go. Yeah.
All right. Fabulous. So today I'm going to talk about telling the story of early childhood development. I used to be the senior program associate at Frameworks Institute, and Frameworks is an organization devoted to telling better stories for social change. And a lot of the work we did was on early childhood issues. So I've been able to continue sharing those teachings and learnings in this present job that I have as the communications director at Child Care Aware. And I hope after this talk, you will feel less frustrated when you're talking to people about childcare and early childhood, and that you'll also have a better handle on some resources to help you tell the story better. So I'm going to share some things. We're going to watch a couple videos and hopefully have some conversation before we're all done. So my first thing, I'd love to know who's in the room. You don't have to worry so much about name, title, and organization because I can't see that anyway, and I don't want Nikki to read it all. But what I really do want you to put in the chat box here is the most common response you get when you tell people what you do for a living. So when you tell people, hey, I direct a child care center, or hey, I run training programs for early educators, or whatever it is that you do, what's the most common response you get? So that will kind of help us understand where you're starting. So you can put it in the chat or in the questions, whatever you can get to, and we'll look at those in a minute. All right. I want to just start with the slide about what strategic communications is, which is the body of work that I'm going to be speaking from. And I promise I'm not going to go into a big academic background on it or anything. This is just this one slide, but I want to emphasize a few things. So strategic communications is based on research. So everything I'm sharing today is research-based. It's not somebody sitting in an office somewhere guessing about these things or saying, hey, I wrote this down. That sounds pretty good. I think I'll use it. It's all research-based. And if you want me to talk more about those methods or how that happens, I'm happy to do that. But the most important thing to know is it really is based on, in this case, on formal research, although there's ways to do this research more informally. Strategic communication is all about the cues in your message that triggers certain patterns of thinking in your audience. Strategic communication uses widely shared and understood values and metaphors to explain causality or how something works. So a lot of times when we're experts at something and we know a lot about something, we forget that most of the people we're talking to know almost nothing. And so we skip over a lot of the explanations of things that people need in order to understand us better. So this webinar will really focus on how do we help people understand child development? What kind of explanations can we use so that things make sense to them? And it's intentional, it's practiced, and it's effective. So circling back to the research ensures that it's effective because at Frameworks, we always measured the outcomes. So we would test our messages on people, both in focus groups and also in surveys, and see if we message in a certain way, does it change people's thinking about the issue? And if the answer was no, we would go back to the drawing board and try again. Okay. So next I'm going to show you a few common ways that people think about early childhood that we know from our research. So here we go, and you can tell me if you've seen any of these. Okay, children just need love. And school readiness really just means pushing kids too fast. So of course, children need love and connection, and we know that development is all about relationships, that child development occurs in the context of supportive relationships. But reducing what you do to love or caring only gets into this whole belief that anything else is pushing children and we shouldn't do it. People don't really understand developmentally appropriate learning. They worry that it's showing flashcards to kids in cribs, you know. they don't really understand. And so if we kind of live in this, children just need love, I'll show you what some of the implications are in a minute from that. But that's a really common understanding that school readiness is actually not a good thing. Another really common frame or deeply held way of thinking is it's all up to the parents. So then you start hearing things like, if you can't afford childcare, you shouldn't have had children. I've heard that so many times, right? Or someone else shouldn't be raising your kids, that having your children in childcare means somebody else is raising them. Okay, so that comes from this idea that anything about children is solely the responsibility of parents. And it makes it really hard to get anyone else in the picture. It's a very shaming and very blaming mindset. And it makes it really hard to talk about anything outside of what we call at Frameworks the family bubble. Okay, so this is just something to always keep in mind that's in people's heads when we start talking about kids. Here's another big one. Stress develops character. So you hear people say things, I didn't have whatever when I was growing up and I turned out okay. So there's really a lack of understanding that there are kinds of systemic frequent stress like poverty, family violence, loss of a parent, frequent moves that are really, really bad for kids. They have a lot of really negative impacts on their development. And it's hard in the way that we usually talk about those things for people to understand that that isn't character developing, that that's toxic, it leads to bad outcomes. So that's just another thing that's kind of floating out there that makes it difficult. So where do all these ideas come from? Well, there's a kind of swamp, we used to call it frameworks of thinking about issues that goes on in people's brain. And it's kind of like things they learned growing up, things they heard in the media, something they saw on social media, what their cousins said, all those things. And they get repeated and repeated over and over and create this kind of swamp of all these things below the surface. And so when you're going out to talk to somebody, all this stuff is hanging out below the surface, and then they come out with these things that I just shared, and you're wondering, well, where did that come from? But it's in their thinking, kind of below even a conscious level. So we always at Frameworks try to map the swamp, and I'm going to show you a picture, if my computer will cooperate, of the swamp of early child development. So here's some of the things that I shared with you. One is this idea of self-made child. So that's where the stress is good for you. We turned out okay. It kind of also, all kids need is discipline. You know, if you just punish them, they'll be fine. Or development just happens. You don't really have to support development because once a kid's born, they just sort of grow up by themselves. This early ed frame is this thing about school readiness and the hurried child and fancy parents and all that. The family bubble is over on the right there. If anything's wrong with the kid, it's because the parents are bad. The parents have failed. So any of you that are parents know how difficult and hard this frame is. And then there's some other things. Brain development's complicated. We want to keep kids safe. That gets in there. And there's a little bit about opportunity, that children are the future. But generally, respondents thought that opportunity begins at school age. The kids are just kind of hanging out until they're about 5 or 6. There isn't a lot going on. So we've been chipping away at these now for quite some time. This original research was done actually in the early 2000s, early to mid 2000s, and then from then on. So I would say we've made some progress on some of these, but still a lot of this is still in the swamp. Okay, so if you can remember those slides I showed with the messages, I'm going to show you where those ideas lead, and that will give you an idea why it's so important to address that thinking. So if children just need love, right? If they just need care, do early educators need to be well paid? Do they need to have credentials or degrees? Does turnover matter? Well, no, because they just need love. Anyone can love a kid, right? My 17-year-old who babysits can love a kid, right? So these things are hard for people to think about if they're in the mindset of kids just need love. Okay, it's really hard. Here's a couple more. Is curriculum necessary? Is assessment important? Are ratios and class size important? Well, only to the extent maybe that every kid can get a hug. So there's a real lack of understanding in general among policymakers and the public of what really goes into quality childcare, because kids just need love. So really, it doesn't matter so much what's happening beyond caring. Interestingly, people extend this thinking all the way up into a K-12 education too, that teachers just need to care and that will take care of everything else. So, where does this come from deeply? I'm not exactly sure, but it's important to know that's there. So if we just launch in and start talking about our curriculum, it's going to be really hard for a lot of people to understand why that matters. They're not going to be that into that. So it's good to know if people are in this mindset, whether it's parents, whether it's policymakers, whoever, it's going to be hard for them to see all the many things we do and why those matter. So this is where I hate online presentations. If I was in person, I'd be looking at you and making sure you're nodding and understanding this. So I'm just going to take a quick break and see if anyone has any questions. You can please just, or things to say, please use the chat because I know you can't unmute. And I can't see you. I am nodding, says Christy. Well, that's good. But seriously.
Diane, this is Nikki. I just wanted to read you a few of the comments that came through when you had asked the
I'm not
question.
seeing them. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you asked the question about, what people say in relation to their job or their work, a lot of comments about, oh, what is that? Tell me more. So you just play with kids all day? Responses of, oh, I've never heard of that. So what is it that you do? Oh, I didn't know that existed. Or how long have you been working for them? So a lot of those same kind of responses.
Great. So I would say I've asked this question in other groups of folks in early childhood, and there is a lot of just, and I didn't really mention this on the slides, but this also is true, of just kind of ignorance, like just kind of not understanding. And I think it gets back to that development is automatic. So that whole realm of early childhood, and there might be like, you're not just hanging out with kids, is kind of a blank slate for people. And so your jobs are kind of a blank slate. Like they really can't fill in what it is exactly you do. Okay, so that's good to know. And so we want to help lead them through some thinking so they get it. And the reason we need people to get and understand, I hope is obvious, and I think I probably am foreshadowing a slide I have in here, but when we don't do that, we end up with policies and practices that are really not good and don't help kids and families or the field. Okay, so let's go on here. So that's some of the issues with kids just need love, or do you just hang out with kids? Maybe is sort of ancillary to that. If it's all up to parents, so that's where people put kids, right? So that's another reason why they can't conceive of what you do, because they can't really think of kids apart from their parents, okay? If it's all up to parents, do we need higher CCAP reimbursements? So those two things might not seem connected to you, but when we're at the legislature trying to get higher reimbursements for child care assistance, if there isn't a sense that we all have some kind of stake in this, then why does the government need to help make child care affordable and make sure that early educators and programs are reimbursed appropriately? Do we need to expand early learning scholarships, tax credits, and other supports? Well, no, we don't, because if you can't afford it, you shouldn't have had the kids. It's sort of your problem to figure out if you're a parent. And that has a lot of implications, of course, for a lack of support for the field. It's not, It's not just parents that are affected by that. Do we need more availability of non-standard hours care, for example? We know this is a huge need out there, but no, we don't, because get a different job. What's wrong with you? Do we need to address childcare deserts? Well, no, parents should just move, or they should stay home, or I don't know, but it's not our problem collectively as a society to figure it out. So this really helps me as a human being not lose my temper or dissolve in a puddle of frustration if I understand, oh, this person that is against these things that seem so obvious to me is thinking in their mind, oh, it's all up to the parents. And if I can help him or her see a broader picture, that might help us have a better conversation. And in fact, from frameworks, we know it can help us have a better conversation. So I want to be positive here. So I've got one more, and then I'm going to pause again and see if anyone has questions. If stress builds character, so remember I talked about that, do we need to address children's mental health? So even saying the phrase children's mental health is nonsensical if you think stress is character building, or if you think development is automatic, for that matter, and kids are just kind of blobs until they go to school. Do we need to support struggling families, or do we need to use positive discipline practices? No, we don't need to do those things because, you know, this builds character. I struggled when I was a kid, and look at me, I'm doing great. So I have to say on this one, we used to do, when I was at Frameworks, a lot of on the street interviewing to get just some sort of, before we did the in-depth research, to get some off-the-cuff material. And we would also use these in training. And I wish I still had access to those videos. But I remember one in particular about stress. We had a respondent on the street actually say that he was beaten as a child and that built character for him. So there's almost no length to which someone will go, which some people will go to disavow that stress for young children isn't a positive. So I think there's so much work we have to do on this one and helping people understand how toxic stress operates. So I have a really great video about that I'm going to show you at the end. So any questions about how these ways of thinking lead to these problems when it comes to supporting our field? Okay, I'm not hearing anything from Nikki, so I'm going to go on.
Diane, there isn't anything right now in the questions or dialogue box, but I'll jump in if there is anything that comes up that's relevant.
Awesome. Well, please, guys, feel free, because a conversation is always better. So, as I said, these ideas create policies that don't support quality, they don't support affordability, they don't support compensation increases for the field, and they don't support training. They don't support those things. So we want all those things. So let's get to the really important thing, which is how do we tell a different kind of story? Okay, whoops, I went backwards and I wanted to go forwards. And really, I promise you, it just did that. I didn't touch anything. Okay, everyone says that. So we have to understand the public's thinking on an issue. So we kind of did that, right? Very quick and dirty, but I gave you some ideas, some information about how people are thinking, and you can notice this yourself. You can really listen to what you're hearing from people. Then we try out new ways of talking. So you can just do this yourself. You can try out different things and see what impact it has. So we did this formally at Frameworks for you around early childhood, but you can try out anything I'm saying today and see if you get different kinds of responses. It's kind of an experiment. Another thing that we've tried to do is create buy-in among stakeholders. And one way Frameworks did this about early childhood is we trained experts in the field of child development to talk in the same way about development that followed the best practices that we were figuring out in our research. And so what has happened over time is these ideas are starting to slip into the vernacular. So now you hear more about building brains. You hear, well, I'll show you the story in a second and you'll see these. So you hear more about building brains. You hear more about brain architecture. You hear more about serve and return, toxic stress, all of these ways of talking that we came up with you see and hear those a lot more because we built this collective buy-in. And then it's a lot of practice. So we all have our favorite ways of speaking about things. And so we have to learn and retrain ourselves with some of these new ways of speaking. So next, I'm going to show you, hopefully, it looks like it's going to work, this really neat video. These are from some of our friends in Alberta. I had the great pleasure of spending quite a significant amount of time in Canada when I was working with Frameworks and helping them develop in Alberta a wonderful effort to teach and learn the core story of development. And so this is a beautiful video that they made, and this really encapsulates all the pieces of a better way to talk about child development. And then I'll give you some resources at the end so you don't have to try to remember all this stuff from watching a video once. Okay, here we go.
Science tells us that the experiences we have in the first years of our lives actually affect the physical architecture of the developing brain. This means that brains aren't just born, they're also built over time based on our experiences.
Okay, I hate to interrupt, but this is the only time I will interrupt. But I wanted to point out how different this is. The idea of actually building something in the brain and making it concrete and about brain development is super helpful to people that are stuck in this sort of ooey gooey, they just need love, or are in this sort of development just happens and we don't have to do anything. So if you take one thing away, you can think of this brain with the little blocks. Okay, now the rest of it I'll just let you absorb, but I did want to mention that.
Just as a house needs a sturdy foundation to support the walls and roof, a brain needs a good base to support all future development. Positive interactions between young children and their caregivers literally build the architecture of the developing brain. Building a sturdy foundation in the earliest years provides a good base for a lifetime of good mental function and better overall health. So just how is a solid brain foundation built and maintained in a developing child? One way is through what brain experts call serve and return interactions. Imagine a tennis match between a caregiver and a child, but instead of hitting a ball back and forth across a net, various forms of communication pass between the two. From eye contact to touch, from singing to simple games like peekaboo. These interactions, repeated throughout a young person's developing years, are the bricks that build a healthy foundation for all future development. But another kind of childhood experience shapes brain development too, and that's stress. Good kinds of stress, like meeting new people or studying for a test, are healthy for development because they prepare kids to cope with future challenges. Another kind of stress, called toxic stress, is bad for brain development. If a child is exposed to serious ongoing hardships like abuse and neglect, and he has no other caregiver in his life to provide support, the basic structures of his developing brain may be damaged. Without a sturdy foundation to properly support future development, he is at risk for a lifetime of health problems, development issues, even addiction. It's possible to fix some of the damage of toxic stress later on, but it's easier, more effective, and less expensive to build solid brain architecture in the first place. One of the things that sturdy brain architecture supports is the development of basic emotional and social skills, an important group of skills which scientists call executive function and self-regulation can be thought of like air traffic control in the child's mental airspace. Think of a young child's brain as the control tower at a busy airport. All those planes landing and taking off and all of the support systems on the ground simultaneously demand the controller's attention to avoid a crash. It's the same with a young child learning to pay attention, plan ahead and remember, and follow lots of rules. Like all of us, kids have to react to things happening in the world around them, while also dealing with worries, temptations, and obligations on their minds. As these demands for attention pile up, air traffic control helps a child regulate the flow of information, prioritize tasks, and above all, find ways to manage stress and avoid mental collisions along the way. Having this ability is a necessity for positive and level mental health. Developing effective air traffic control, overcoming toxic stress, and building solid brain architecture are things kids can't do on their own. And since strong societies are made up of healthy, contributing individuals, it's up to us as a community to make sure all young people have the kinds of nurturing experiences they need for positive development. To build better futures, we need to build better brains.
So there's a few things I just wanted to point out about the video. So one thing is you'll notice there's a lot of metaphors. And the reason is that people think metaphorically, and it's a really easy shorthand to help them understand something complicated. So what actually happens in the brain for executive function development is really complicated. But if I say, well, it's like air traffic control, right away you have like a lot to work with. Or if I say kids need interactions with caregivers that are like serve and return in a game of tennis or volleyball, right away you understand something about that. Or if I say building healthy brain development is like building a house, you have to start with the foundation. Well, right away, that's something you can understand. So metaphors are really important. Another thing you'll notice from the video is this kind of sense of this is something we all can participate in. So you didn't see in this video a tight focus on parents. You heard language about caregivers, you heard language about we all, visually there was always a group of adults, not just two adults and the kid. So really trying to bring other things into the frame. So when people start to understand this story, then they can begin to understand what high quality care looks like. So for instance, if you know that that relationship of serve and return is how brains are built, and I say, we have a problem in the childcare field with high turnover, it's obvious to me why that is bad, because I can think, oh, kids need that serve and return. And if their caregiver is always changing, I could understand why that would, fall apart for them. They can understand why it's a public good to support a childcare system. So if they understand that something really important is happening in early childhood, that brains are literally being built, I get that, oh my gosh, this is really important. We support a K-12 system. We need to support a birth to 5 system because it's almost more important then, right? We're building the foundation. If I say early educators need to be well compensated, they need to be well paid, that makes more sense if I understand that there's a lot of stuff going on that we're helping children develop resilience, we're helping their brains grow. Obviously, I want people engaged in that are well paid, that are going to be stable, that are going to be there, that know what they're doing, that have training and skills. All those things start to fall in line in my thinking when I understand development. And also why childcare should be affordable and accessible, because it's a public good. Because if we don't have kids that have good development, they're really going to have problems later on. And that's going to be, as the video talked about, difficult to fix and really expensive to fix. So I hope you can see this is how we make that kind of shift happen. We give people a different way to understand development. So it's not just like, well, what do you do? I don't even know what you do. If people know the essential job that child care early educators are doing, then they're going to understand some of the needs better. All right. So I want to share another resource and video for you here. So the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University sounds really academic, and it can be, but they also have this huge range of resources about child development that they worked with frameworks to develop and frame. So all of their materials are research-based in terms of how they talk about develop. And they have this sort of multi-level for every topic. So they have things for the general public and parents. They have academic research briefs. They have materials for policymakers. They have all different levels of things. So if you wanted, like, for instance, to have a handout for your parents about toxic stress or about brain development or about serve and return or whatever, they have materials that would work, and they have them in multiple languages. If you wanted something to show at a staff in service, they would have that. You know, they have, I really can't say enough about this research, resource. It's developingchild@harvard.harvard.edu. And I assume, I know this, Christy will be sending out a follow-up to this talk with these resources in them. So to give you a little taste, I want to share a video about toxic stress that's aimed at parents. And this might be something you could include if you send out an email newsletter or something. And they have these on all the different development topics. And let's see if I can be 2 for 2 here. Yep. All right.
We all want to give our children what they need to grow to their full potential. And as parents, we play an important role in their development. But our parenting is affected by the supports and challenges in our lives, including experiences that cause what's known as toxic stress. Stress is called toxic when it doesn't let up, and there aren't supportive relationships to help us cope. That can make it hard to get through the day, let alone be the best caregivers we can be. The overwhelming burden of toxic stress can affect the health and well-being of adults. It can also affect the development of children in ways that can last a lifetime. Stress that puts us in a constant state of fight or flight can make it feel like we're always on edge, or like it's impossible to calm down. And these feelings can overload our ability to provide the supportive relationships that children need in order to thrive. Think of toxic stress as heavy cargo. Just as a truck can only haul so much weight before it stops moving forward, challenging life circumstances like losing a job or not having a place to live can weigh us down. And just as a truck can break down if it carries too much for too long, we too can wear down from being overburdened without the support we need. When toxic stress is related to things we can't control, like poverty, abuse, or racism, it can feel especially heavy to take on. But experiencing toxic stress doesn't have to determine who we are or how we act. And understanding how stress affects us can empower us to make change in our lives. There are things we can do to buffer ourselves and our children against the effects of even the most intense stress. Just as redistributing cargo from an overloaded truck can help it run again, supports and services, things like food pantries, job training programs, or even just talking with someone who cares, can help us focus on caring for ourselves and our children. And just as regular maintenance is required to keep a truck running, reliable access to community services can help us manage the load during challenging times. Reaching out to get support can be difficult, but things that might seem very small, like sitting and breathing deeply, playing I Spy with your child, or even sharing a walk or a snuggle can make a difference. Over time, these small steps can build our resilience and our children's by strengthening the skills and relationships that help us cope. And our communities can build resilience too by providing services and opportunities that help all families thrive. Supports like these help build a strong foundation for developing brain architecture. So the earlier we can provide them, the better. But the brain is capable of change throughout life, and it's never too late for a tune-up. Coping with and healing from toxic stress takes a lot of effort and support. But we all need the help of others in difficult times. And building resilience and strength in our families and communities is one of the most important investments we can make as a society. In the end, It will help all of us become the parents that we want to be. We all,
Oops. Okay. So that truck metaphor and redistributing the stress is new for me from that video that was since my time at Frameworks, but I think that's a really useful way to think about it. And of course, quality childcare is one of those buffers that can really help children and families, especially the kinds of programs that really engage the whole family. So, all right, I am going to end the presentation and stop sharing my screen so you can actually see me. And I realized I did not research how to do that. Nikki, help me.
Hey, that's okay. You can just go ahead and stop sharing your screen if you want.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that. I'm sorry, I didn't
No,
practice.
that's okay. There should be a little icon on your GoToWebinar dashboard. It looks like a screen, like a rectangle, and you just click it. There you go.
There we are. Okay, awesome. So I would be really, yep, I'm here. So I'd be really interested in the last few minutes we have, if people have questions, comments, ideas, anything.
Thanks, Diane. This was amazing. Those Harvard resources, I think, are going to really spur on a lot of things. So there isn't anything in the questions or the dialogue chat box at this time, but I do have a question for you that maybe others are interested in. At the beginning, when you were talking about, you know, people's perspective or where they're coming from before you launch into all of the things, how related to people's core beliefs is that? And what suggestions do you have on that?
So I would say a couple of things, because I didn't have time to go into the whole deep thing. People reason from their values and their deeply held understanding of the world, but usually people also have, well, what can I say? Like in the I'll try it this way. In the United States, we have a strong, in the majority dominant culture, we have a strong belief in individualism. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. People should be able to make it on their own. You kind of have to take charge and go. And there's some really positive things about that. But sometimes when we're trying to think about, well, why should I care about childcare? I don't have a kid under 5. It's an impediment. But we also have a strain of community thinking. So barn raising, coming together in natural disasters and helping each other. You know, there's also that there. It's just a little harder to cue that up. So we have to intentionally cue that up and help people access those values too, so that they can think about some of these things in a better way. Sometimes what's the first thing they think of isn't the most helpful. So like the first thing they think of around kids stuff is always, oh, it's the parents. But most people can think broader than that if you help them think broader than that. If you don't address it, they'll stay in the parents thing, you know, because that's so strong. But we did a lot of research at Frameworks and a lot of conversation with people. And once you help them think about, well, you know what? You know, brains are being built. That's a very important thing. And then later on, that really impacts these children's ability to be contributing members of society. And then people will sort of start nodding, like they can get that once you talk them through it. But it's not the first thing they think of. So does that kind of help?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I think
that's across the political spectrum too. This isn't a partisan thing. It really isn't.
Great, thanks for sharing that. That's helpful. Deb says, what might be the implications of the thinking, quote, it's all up to the parents, unquote, and teaching children about race and culture?
Oh, that is such a great. So, yeah, I think that makes us reluctant. You know, we don't want to tread on domains that we feel belong to parents alone, right? I think that's what you're getting at. I hope I'm getting this correctly. If I'm not, please type some more. Because we don't see a shared interest in helping children develop their brains and learn how to interact in a cooperative way, for example, and some of that executive functioning and being able to, you know, monitor ourselves and have some self-regulation and care for others and, you know, all those sorts of good pro-social things. If that's all the domain of the parents, then really they're just kind of hanging out with us in childcare while their parents work as kind of a holding cell, you know, until the parents show up again. And we know, of course, as the opposite of what's really happening, but you know, that's kind of the thought. So I do think it has implications for that. The other way I think the whole issue of racism and cultural being culturally competent and fluent really plays into this is just in our ability, of course, to offer children buffered environments that don't continue, especially children of color, that don't continue to perpetuate the stress, the toxic stress of racism that they're experiencing in the rest of their lives. So ideally, childcare settings are a place where kids can relax, they can be themselves, and they are getting that stress, the stress of racism and bias is buffered. Unfortunately, sometimes, you know, if we're not being really intentional about that, a childcare setting might just be like anywhere else in their life outside of their family where it's kind of tough. But there's a great opportunity there to have our childcare programs really be buffers and really be safe spaces for kids. So I hope I caught your question, but let me know if that wasn't quite it.
She says thank you, and you're spot on.
Great question.
Great.
Yeah, this toxic stress buffering, like don't sell yourself short. The research is very strong that toxic stress can be buffered. It really can be buffered in kids. We really, especially when they're little, we can do a lot of things that can help them. We can't always fix the stress in their lives, but we really can help them get through it. Makes a huge difference. When they do studies of people that came through really difficult childhoods, the one commonality they had is they had at least one adult in their life that supported them. So we can be that person. I think about that a lot. Can I be that? Can I be that one person?
Diane, you mentioned and kind of alluded to this at the beginning too, but you know, many of the individuals that are on the webinar today or who will be listening to the recording or hearing the follow-up, they know, right, all the great things that their program is designed and how it's there to help support the things that we talked about and, you know, healthy children in so many various ways. But some of the things you gave us today, the resources will help to articulate that and
Yes.
put that in kind of a more concise way. When it relates to public policy makers, what resources could you share about how to, I mean, I know there's a lot out there, so I'm opening a can of worms. But
I would say a couple things. First of all, I would say, and I always say this, if you're able, when the legislature, when the Minnesota legislature isn't in session, you can call up your representative or senator and say, hey, early childhood issues are really important. And if you ever want to come visit a program, you're welcome to come and visit and see what we're doing. You know, if you feel really positive about what you're doing, you know, a lot of people have never been in a childcare program or they haven't been in it since their kids were little a long time ago. So that's just one thing right there. But these tools about how you talk, they work for everyone. So policymakers are human beings too. So talking about development using these metaphors will also be effective with them. And so the materials like from the Center for Developing Child are effective with everyone. Policymakers don't necessarily know more than anyone else. Sometimes they know less, it seems like. But yeah, helping them understand is also important, and you can use the same tools, really. It's not like a special set of metaphors or something.
So important, right? We're all human. So thanks, Diane. That's a really important
We're
point.
all human, and nobody's bad. Like, nobody's evil or trying, they're just not thinking productively, right? They're operating from these assumptions that are kind of working against where we're trying to go. And it's really helped me to remember that, because then I feel more willing to engage and to keep at it, rather than assuming, oh, what's wrong with you? Why don't you get it?
So I'm not seeing any other questions
Okay.
or comments at this time, but I do just want to implore the participants, if they do have anything else, we'll be on for a few more minutes, type in, or feel free to raise your hand, click the hand icon button. We can take you off mute if you'd rather just ask it that way. And then I'll just defer to Christy to see if there's anything else she has as we kind of come to an end here.
Thanks, Nikki. And thank you, Diane, for being here, spending your time with us today to talk about this topic. And thanks to our participants who are here today as well. I hope you'll come back to the follow-up email that I send and rewatch this video, as needed to refresh on the ideas that Diane shared today. I think that our audience will definitely come away from today's presentation with new ways to discuss the importance of early care and education, and with specific examples to lean on as well.
Just had a comment saying thank you. Love the videos to help explain things.
And you can show those videos on a parent night or to staff or whatever. So it's really nice. And like I said, the center has tons of video.
Great. I think we'll go ahead and just leave it open for about 30 more seconds and then we'll close up. All right. Thanks again, Diane. Watch for the follow-up, everyone, from Christy, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.